There's a meeting on your calendar. You've been in this room before, or one just like it. Someone asks for input. You have something to say. You know you have something to say. And then the calculation begins. Is it worth it to speak right now? Is what you have to say actually good enough to take up the air? What if you say it wrong? What if someone disagrees and you can't hold your ground? What if you say it and the room goes quiet in that specific way? So you wait. And while you're waiting, someone else says it. And the moment passes. And you spend the next hour, maybe the next day, replaying it in your head. This video is about what that moment has been costing you. Not as a concept, not as a vague feeling that you're somehow falling behind. As a number, as a door, as a version of your career that still hasn't happened. Before anything else, there is something that needs to be said clearly. What was just described is not a personality flaw. It is not evidence that you're not cut out for this. It is not realistic self-assessment or appropriate professional modesty. It is a pattern, a specific, recognizable, well-documented pattern of professional self-erasure that affects people who are often among the most capable in the room and who have spent so long managing the internal cost of showing up that the showing up itself has become the smallest part of what they do. You've probably experienced it across multiple forms. Not raising your hand for the project that felt slightly above your current title. Not negotiating the rate because you were just grateful they wanted you at all. Staying quiet in the debrief when you had the clearest read on what went wrong. Letting someone else take credit for something that was mostly yours because correcting it felt more dangerous than absorbing the loss. None of that is shyness. None of that is introversion. None of that is being realistic about your limitations. That is chronic professional self-exclusion driven by a self-worth system that learned somewhere, at some point, that visibility was dangerous. That being seen clearly meant being found out. That taking up space in rooms like this one was something other people were allowed to do. You weren't born with that belief. You were taught it. And it has been operating quietly in your professional life long enough that it probably feels indistinguishable from who you are. It is not who you are, but it has been shaping what your career looks like. And the gap between those two things is exactly what today is about. Now, to understand why this pattern doesn't simply correct itself the way most patterns do, here is the mechanism at work. Every time you self-exclude, the pattern generates evidence. You didn't raise your hand for the project, so you didn't get the project, so you didn't build the skill. So the next time something similar comes up, the belief that you weren't ready feels even more true, because now there's data. You stayed quiet in the meeting, so your presence in the room diminished slightly. So the next meeting, the dynamic has already shifted just enough that speaking feels marginally harder than it did before. You accepted the lower rate, so your compensation baseline is lower. So the gap between what you earn and what you watch others earn grows just enough each year to make the next negotiation feel even more weighted. This is what researchers call the confidence-competence cycle running in reverse. When you are allowed to build competence through exposure and visibility, confidence follows not as a feeling, but as accumulated evidence of your own capability. When you self-exclude from the exposure, the evidence never builds. And the voice that said you weren't ready gets a little louder every time it turns out to be right, not because it was accurate, but because you let it make the decision. Your nervous system is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, running a threat assessment before every professional moment of visibility and reporting back whether it's safe to proceed. The problem is not the assessment. The problem is that the software is old. It was written in a different environment, one where the cost of being seen and found lacking was real and significant and worth protecting yourself from. That environment may not exist anymore in the same form, but the monitoring system never got the update. It is still filing the same report before every meeting, every email, every moment when your name could go on something that matters. You are not the problem. The pattern is the problem. And the pattern has a cost that is specific enough to name. This is where things get precise, and where that vague sense of being behind becomes something you can actually look at directly. Most people with this pattern carry a vague sense that they are behind, that their career looks different than it should by now, that something has been lost, even if they couldn't say exactly what. The vagueness is part of what makes the pattern survivable. If you let yourself look at the actual cost with precision, the grief of it would require you to do something. So you keep it vague. You call it imposter syndrome and move on. You tell yourself you'll be ready next time. You stay busy enough that the accounting never quite happens. Today, the accounting is going to happen. Research on salary negotiation and compensation gaps consistently shows that professionals who don't negotiate their initial offers leave an average of $100,000 to $200,000 on the table over the course of a 10-year career. Not because they were less qualified, but because they didn't ask. That is not a metaphor. That is a number. Beyond the salary, there are the promotions. The average promotion cycle in most professional environments runs 12 to 18 months. Every time you self-selected out of visibility, every time you stayed quiet when you had the clearest idea, every time you didn't put your name on the project, every time you watched someone less experienced get the opportunity because they simply asked for it with more confidence than you could locate, you extended your own cycle. Not by weeks, by years. There are rooms you have not been in yet that you should already be sitting in. There are conversations about your career that are happening without you because you have not made yourself visible enough for anyone to think to include you. There are versions of your professional life that branched off quietly every time the moment came, and the internal calculation said, not yet. And then there is the cost that doesn't have a number. The specific exhaustion of performing competence every day in a room where you privately believe it could be exposed as an accident at any moment. The energy that goes into that performance, the monitoring, the second-guessing, the reconstructing of every interaction afterward to see if anything slipped, that energy belongs to your work. It belongs to your thinking. It belongs to the version of you who could walk into that room and be fully present in it, instead of half present and half managing. You have been paying for this with things that mattered. And the question is no longer whether the cost was real. The question is whether you are willing to keep paying it. If this opens something and you want the actual framework, not a confidence-building program, not something that asks you to feel ready first, there is a resource in the description called Quiet Confidence, Speaking Up When You've Been Silent. It is built specifically for the professional moments this video just named. The meeting, the negotiation, the moment your name could go on something that matters. It gives you a structure for acting before the feeling arrives. Link is in the description and the pinned comment. Let's look at what actually interrupts this pattern, because it isn't what most people expect. Here is what doesn't interrupt this pattern. Feeling more confident. Waiting until you feel ready is the mechanism of the pattern, not the exit from it. If feeling ready were going to happen first, it would have happened by now. The pattern is specifically designed to move the threshold of readiness just far enough ahead of you that you never quite reach it. Confidence, for people with this pattern, does not precede the action, it follows it. Which means the interruption has to happen before the feeling is there. What actually interrupts it is a decision made from grief, not from readiness. Not, I feel confident enough to do this, but I have looked at what staying silent has cost me, and I am not willing to keep paying. Those are different decisions. One requires you to feel something you don't feel yet. The other only requires you to have looked clearly, honestly, at what the silence has taken. The anticipation of what might happen if you speak will always feel larger than the actual event. This is not a personality quirk. It is a measurable psychological phenomenon called affective forecasting error. Your nervous system overestimates the intensity and duration of the negative outcome. The rejection that feels career-ending beforehand is rarely that in reality. The moment of discomfort in the room passes. What doesn't pass is the accumulated weight of not having spoken. So the practice is not feel confident and then act. The practice is act in spite of the forecast and let the evidence accumulate. One concrete thing. Before the next professional moment arrives, identify the next opportunity, the meeting, the conversation, the email you've been drafting and not sending, and commit to one sentence, not a speech, not a fully formed position. One sentence that takes up space. One sentence that puts your perspective into the room. That is not nothing. It is in fact exactly where the evidence starts to build. The voice in your head that said you weren't ready cannot survive a sustained record of moments when you were. If this video named something you're ready to go deeper on, the next step is in the description. Quiet Confidence picks up exactly where this ends. In the room, before the moment. What's the professional moment you've been circling? The one you keep telling yourself you'll be ready for next time. There are rooms you haven't walked into yet. Not because you weren't qualified, not because the timing was wrong, not because you needed more experience, more credentials, more time, because something in you decided, in the moment it mattered, that the cost of being seen was higher than the cost of staying invisible. And the cost of staying invisible The salary left on the table, the promotions that went to someone else, the ideas that left the room in someone else's mouth, that cost was real. It deserves to be called what it is. Not a character flaw, not laziness, not a lack of ambition. The grief of someone who has been carrying something too heavy for too long without the right support. The fact that you watched this video means something. It means part of you has already done the accounting. Part of you already knows what the silence has cost. And part of you, the part that was right to bring you here, is not willing to keep paying it. That part was always there. It was there in the meeting when you had something to say and almost said it. It was there in the job description you read 3 times before closing the tab. It was there every time you caught yourself and thought, that should have been me. It was not wrong. There are things you didn't say, rooms you didn't enter, opportunities that branched off quietly while you were waiting to feel ready. That is a real loss, and it deserves to be grieved. Not weaponized against you, but grieved. Because grief is what turns a vague sense of falling behind into a decision that something is going to be different. You are not starting over, you are starting from the most honest place you have stood in a while. And the next room, the next meeting, the next moment your name could go on something, that one is still ahead of you. You already know something shifted.